So we've been here for about 20 minutes. Doesn't seem like anybody's here, and no one's answered the door. So.
Yes?
Hello, I'm Aaron. And I'm Sam.
Hi, you must be the guys that called earlier.
Yep, we're here to investigate the Jasper Dam case.
Good, well, come on in.
Okay, thanks. Can you tell us a little bit about Jasper Dam?
Well, I can only tell you what I know, and which isn't as much as my husband knows, but we've had some weird things happen around here that aren't always explained. For instance, we hear things. We hear the wind blows a lot, and we hear the house creaking and sounding like somebody's walking around upstairs when there's nobody there. Things like that. Shells. Lobster shells. It's like somebody's been...
things too?
Well, it's like somebody's been here eating lobster, and then there they are. All that's left is shells, and sometimes they're on the rocks, sometimes they're up on the grass. Obviously, someone has eaten them and left them around, so we don't know who that is. My husband has an idea, but...
And what is his story? Do you know anything about his story?
Well, I don't know much, but I know that this occurred when he was young. He was 18 years old, and he had never been down to this cottage before by himself, and it was late at night, and he was feeling a little nervous because all of the noises and things going on. And I guess you'll have to talk to him about it, but I know that he found traces of seaweed, as if somebody had been walking around and leaving it everywhere they went. And he felt sure that he had met with Jasper Dam.
Well, thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah. And we'll just talk to your husband when he comes back and
Okay.
get a few more details, but thank you very much.
Fine, no problem.
It's very helpful.
No problem.
So, can you tell us a little bit about Jasper Dam?
Jasper Dam arrived in my life in the summer of 1960, which was the year that I graduated from high school. Didn't have a clue what I was going to be doing with my career, so I took some time off and ended up down here at the Cove by myself, which was kind of unusual. Being 18 years old, I wasn't frightened by much of anything, so it wasn't a stretch to come down here by myself. I had my own license. My family let me use the car, and so ended up here for an overnight by myself. A little uncomfortable maybe when the sun went down. We did have, there was electricity here, and so there was power at the cottage. Didn't have the floodlights outside. The only light outside was the one at the kitchen door. So that was fine, and most evenings we have a fire in the fireplace, and so as night set in, and I think it probably turned on the kerosene lanterns up here just because it was nice to have. It settled in for an evening. I'm not sure that we even had a TV back then, so there wasn't much entertainment, so I was probably reading. And as things got dark, then I started to just get just that little thing. Well, I'm alone down here now, and it started to just not having been here by myself before. And this is at the end of the road, and it's a long way out, and it's very quiet down here, and it's very dark. So not too worried, but it was just one of those things. And so as the evening went on and the fire kind of died down, and started thinking a little bit about going to bed. And at that time, the bedroom is in the corner over here. Wasn't going to go upstairs for sure, but I was going to sleep downstairs in the downstairs bedroom, which was kind of my bedroom. So as we got toward evening, you start getting sensitized to what's going on around. And the wind was kind of kicking up, and it was a little bit of the camp wasn't near what it is today, so the cottage, and so you could hear the wind kind of building, and it was howling out there, and the tide had come in, and there was enough wind out there so the waves were breaking on the rock. And so these things were all building on my mind, and of course the thought of going to bed in the dark like that, it occurred to me that now I was really alone in a really dark, cold place. So finally the fire died down, and I managed to get in bed cold by myself, and then of course you start hearing things, and of course I knew it was my imagination, but I heard something out on the porch, and it was just a sound that I hadn't heard before. It was a thump, just a thump, and so I couldn't imagine what it would be, but I said, it's just all in my head, and so I tried to go to sleep, and thump. Then it was like, there's something out there, so I went and got a flashlight, and I kind of, back then the windows in the door were frosted, and there were just these old window panes, and I looked out I shined a light out. I didn't go outside, but I shined a light outside. I didn't see anything out there. So I went and climbed back in bed, and then it was just something dragging on the porch. And by now I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about what's going on. So I'm not sure I really want to go out and check the situation out. So I shine a flashlight out there, and there's nothing that I can see. So I spent most of the night just kind of wondering what was out there doing this with the dragging and I could swear I could hear some chain or something dragging behind. Yeah, so it was a real concern for me, and I never did sleep that much that night, and I knew there was something that was just not really right, and that sound kept going, and nothing that I could see with the flashlight, and so I got through the night with very little sleep. Got up the next day, and of course with the sun up, then it felt much better, and I walked out then, and to my surprise I found on the porch big slugs of seaweed, which in the tide hadn't been that high, so it had to have gotten there somehow. Big clumps of seaweed that were dragged up on the porch and scuff marks across the porch like this. And it was like someone was dragging a boot across the porch, and they were dragging the boot across the porch and the seaweed to come with them. And also there was a piece of lobster warp, something old rotten piece of lobster warp, an old piece of lobster trap. When they made the traps in the old days with the wood like this, and it was like an old chunk of lobster trap that come up with it too. So there had been something there, and it wasn't my imagination. There is the story that goes back to the lobsterman Jasper. A story that as I understand it from my father or grandfather or both of them, is that Jasper was lost overboard, hauled over with the warp that got wrapped around his leg. And they did recover his boat, and then never did recover his body. And so the only thing I could think of is that, there's this lobsterman lost out here somewhere, Jasper, and maybe that was him. But there was some seaweed up here in the porch, and there was some lobster warp and a piece of an old trap, and so it settled in my mind anyway. So I was here for a couple of days. It didn't bother me too much for that day. I just thought it was all just my imagination. So sure enough, we got into the same situation the next night. We had fire going in the fireplace, and I was settling in for the night. And then, of course, I started working on my mind again. Now it's getting dark, and I'm still down here by myself. And the concern I have is, how am I going to sleep tonight? Or am I going to sleep tonight, worrying about what the noises were out there. And so, and the fire died down, and sure enough, it was time to go to bed. And I climbed in bed and tried to go to sleep, and I did get off to sleep. And somewhere, you know, in the wee hours, I heard that same sound again. It was the a boot dragging on a porch. And so I got up with a flashlight and I shined it out the window, and there was nothing there that I could see. And so I tried to get back to sleep, and then the sound was there again. And so this time I said, look, I got to find out what's going on. So I went out the side door and I opened the door, which I really didn't want to do, and I shined a light, and if I could see what looked to me to be an old wizened sailor or lobsterman, and he had the sou'wester on, and he was all hunched over, and he was just but I shined the light and I went to and he wasn't really there, so it was kind of, did I really see that? It was probably my imagination, but I really think to this day that it was Jasper Dan, because the next morning I got out there and there was the seaweed, and there was, you know, the same, just another piece of lobster warp and an old broken trap and a piece of chain, and so I really think that Jasper Dan had come back to visit me again. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Honey, it's
Plain
really
and simple.
getting chilly in here.
Okay, well, maybe you should
Somebody
put a log
needs
on
to
the
put
fire.
a
Oh, all
log
right.
on the
I'll put a
fire.
log on the
Because
fire.
everything.
It's
log on the
cold.
Yeah.
But the thing with that is that. Do you guys hear that?